Hi, welcome to another episode of the AI Builders podcast. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Alberto Gimeno, the co-founder and CEO of Infovox. I was really excited to have Alberto on because he ticks three boxes that none of our previous guests ticked. One, he's a serial entrepreneur. Two, he's went through the prestigious YC accelerator. And three, he's a European founder building his startup and scale up in San Francisco. In this episode, we cover a lot of different topics, from some of the constraints that we have in Europe when we're building companies, to the talent density that's in San Francisco, to what it really takes to scale your AI company into a globally recognized product.
One. Hey, and I don't care about what they say. Come from a place where we pray for better.
Alberto, welcome to the pod.
Hey, Sean, thank you for having me.
No problem, man. I was really excited to get you on the AI Builders podcast, right? Because you kind of check the three boxes that I'm kind of like curious to learn from, right? One, you're a serial founder. Two, you're a European in the epicenter of technology in San Francisco. And three, you're building products for developers, right? So you check all the boxes. So I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation.
That's great. Well, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's kick off, right? So, I guess Infovox is not your first rodeo, and you founded it with the co-founders in your previous business as well, right? So, take me through the journey of founding Infovox, and what were some of the things that you fast tracked, the mistakes you made in previous companies that you kind of fast tracked with Infovox.
For sure. Our company, Invofox, we actually started product development in 2021, but it was a complex product. And this was pre-ChatGPT. So building an AI company actually meant training and deploying machine learning models. So there was a fair bit of technical complexity to it. So we launched and went to market in early 2022. But before that, the same founding team, we had already been doing several things. We actually have been co-founding companies together for the last 10 years. So we've done from direct to consumer solutions in the sports and event space, to an ETL solution. ETL is basically taking data from one place and crunching it and working with it a little bit and getting ready for some other place, like standardized integration between systems, that sort of thing, or getting data ready for data scientists, that type of thing. So we also built that product, which was, I think, the one that was a little closer because it was a B2B solution. And we kind of over time, over these years, we acquired some skills and we learned a little bit, so we were better prepared when Invofox came around. And when I say came around, is because we actually stumbled into the idea to be able to, well, pay for our salaries and the basic expenses during these previous several years. We actually ended up building this boutique software development firm in which we worked with larger companies, mostly in Spain, which is where I'm from, but also in other European countries. And we did the software development, also some AI machine learning projects for them. And while doing this, we ended up talking to a couple of clients that had trouble working with, handling their incoming documentation. And they shared with us that they had tested different products in the market, that nothing really seemed to to really solve the problem they were struggling with. So that's how we became aware of the problem. Before that, I just thought, OCR, mature technology, I'm sure this is kind of a done deal, it's solved, but it really isn't. So that's how we became aware of the problem. We started exploring it, and again, because we had done all of these things prior to Invofox, I think we were in a better position. For example, we were very much very deliberate about analyzing the market and deciding what it is that we were going to do, if anything. Things like talking to many potential clients across different industries and sectors, formulating different hypotheses for what the ICP might be, trying different distribution channels to see what might actually work out for a first iteration of the company. We also had already developed a certain network, not a huge network, but a network of professionals and companies that we could talk to, and share what we were building. And for the combination of all of those things, we were able to see that there was something to this before
Hmm.
actually committing anything to actually developing the solution. You have to keep in mind that the rules of building a tech company have have been shaken. They've changed significantly over even the last few months, because right now the cost of building has dropped. Like, it's
Hmm.
now much, you can do it much faster and cheaper than ever before, especially if you are really good at what you do and you understand kind of the end point where you want to get.
Hmm.
You are kind of multiplex. You can do 10 or 100x what you could before. That was not the case in 2021. So based on previous experiences, we knew that we wanted to have some kind of firm ground, some foundations, before we actually committed significant resources to building this thing. So we did that. It started working well, and we got some, initial commitments to, hey, if you guys do this and it looks promising, it looks well, it works well, we probably will use it. So we built a first prototype in 2 or 3 months, and it worked really well. And by really well, I mean that everything that we had identified in the market that we should be benchmarking against, we were actually already building, already beating it with this initial solution that we, of course, saw had plenty of space to improve itself.
Hmm.
Um, so we basically launched with that, and I think we were also able to build on our previous experiences, because it's very different to build a toy project, something that you're just going to build and use internally to
Hmm.
kind of see if something is worth exploring. That's very different to building a production ready solution,
Hmm.
to scale it, to have something that in our case is able to ingest and consistently process millions of documents. Um, so I think those experiences, the previous go-to-market and more deliberate
Yeah.
analysis of whether a solution is actually worth building, and our experience building software and machine learning projects, and resilient and mature architectures that will sustain a project in production. So that all of kind of came together when we were building Invofox, and I think it was a good moment for us to kind of find this idea.
Awesome. Awesome. It sounds like an early investor's dream, right? Where you kind of built and forged the relationships in previous companies, kind of figured out how each of the founders worked, being able to build like a mini distribution channel, and also the expertise then to go and execute like faster, right? So that initial 3 months was actually the combination of years prior
For
working
sure.
together and building up to that. Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess that kind of paved your way into YC, right? And that kind of gave you a good compelling story to then jump into YC.
Definitely. I mean, we are jumping ahead a little bit here, because what you're saying, I think in hindsight, is true. But
Hmm.
actually, we raised some money before YC. We did kind of a
Right.
pre-seed round, and that was by far the most difficult fundraising process I've ever gone through. Like,
Right.
ever since, I've raised money a few times, and the process has been getting easier and easier over time. But at that point, even though I agree we were a strong team, and a team that actually checked many of the boxes that many investors look for, we basically had no reputation in the investment community. We didn't have connections with VCs or other investors. So basically, I had to invest significant time and effort, just cold outbound, trying to get something started. We got rejected, I don't know, literally 100 or maybe more times. I ended
Yeah.
up talking to like 150 different um, early stage funds, business angels, and we ended up being able to raise some money from this crowd investing platform that was active at the moment in Spain. It was called Dozen Investments, and that actually kind of saved. as we were running out of fumes because we had decided to go all in into Invofox, and we had some money from the previous business, but it was running out, and we were very close to not being able to make payroll for the small team that we had, and it was kind of last minute, like a few days later, and we would have actually missed payroll. And after that, that is true that things started really working. We closed the first few customers, we got some revenue, and we got into YC. We actually got into YC at a more mature or later stage than many companies that go through the program. Not all of them for sure, but I think many people don't know this, and I find that when I talk to founders that at some point would like to go through YC's program, it's not uncommon to hear something like, "We're not ready yet. Maybe next year. Maybe when we, hit X, Y, Z milestones." And actually, most teams that are going through YC are pre-revenue. Many are pre-product. They just have an idea, and often they scratch that idea and they'll do something completely different altogether. YC, for the most part, I think invests in strong technical teams that are going to be able to work well together long term. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what they're looking for. Yeah, and in our case, so their strategy has flipped a little bit, or evolved rather a little bit since 2022. But at that point, they were investing more in companies that were founded overseas rather than being so US focused as they are. Again, they used to be in the early days and now again. But in that, like a few years ago, they were looking around and investing in international companies like ours. They've always invested and they continue to invest in international founders. That's different. But the thing is the business an American business? So we had an opportunity there. The I think the bar to clear to get into YC, if you were not building an American business, was a little higher. And I think that like having some revenue, we're talking probably 80 to 100K ARR. So very early stage. We're talking,
Mm-hmm.
we're far from covering our costs and everything. But it was a sign that something was probably working. And yeah, we got into YC and we did the summer 22 batch.
Nice. And how was that experience?
Mm, it was really great. So one thing that you find when you enter a community like YC, and more broadly speaking, when you partake into the Silicon Valley culture. I used to live in Madrid, now I live in San Francisco in Silicon Valley. Um, the rhythm is completely different, and you find yourself consistently surrounded by people that are, super talented and significantly more successful than you are. And I guess that it depends on what one wants out of life, but I find that it's better to be surrounded by people that are more successful than you, because that kind of drives you. It kind of
Yeah.
shows you that it can be done, that people that are sure smart, hardworking, talented people, but in the end just human beings with the same flaws and limitations that everybody has, that they made it. So why don't you? What's stopping you from growing your business, from being more successful, from being more ambitious? And it kind of the scope of your ambitious. I've always considered myself a very ambitious and a very competitive person, but once you get into, like, you enter this arena, this context, like the expectations go through the roof, and what used to be your definition of success before, you realize that you're thinking too small and that you should be, more ambitious and aim really, go for the stars. And that's what you see here. And I guess it's not for everybody, but I feel like if you do what we do, hey, it's a great place to do it. You can learn a lot. You can make great friends, because also people are very open and welcoming here. You can make good friends that are actually in a similar situation. Because one of the things that I experienced while building the previous businesses and also the first iterations of Invofox from Spain, especially once we started having some level of success, is that it's hard to surround yourself with people that are going through it, or ideally that have gone through it and are in a more advanced stage than the one you see you encounter yourself in. Um, I'm not saying by any means that there are no amazingly successful tech founders in Spain. Of course there are, but the density and the probability of you running into one of them, and participating, in a circle in which that is common, and that basically those are your peers with which you hang out and spend time day in and day out. That's something that I find is uniquely in Silicon Valley.
Do you think so? Like Europe has a lot to offer, right? Don't get me wrong. And this is not my next question is not a sly on Europe, but do you think just European founders versus American founders, right? Do you think that there is more risk adverse from coming from Europe, or is that just kind of the way Europe is in terms of like it's different states? We've kind of like, people probably go back to historic times where, it wasn't so long ago when all of Europe was at war with each other, right? Maybe that's breeding true, but do you think we're more risk adverse, or do you think the market is kind of constructed in a way, like from a VC perspective, that's more risk adverse and doesn't take the big bets?
Sure.
And I guess are people, even from a buying perspective, like the procurement cycles is the States just more mature in that arena?
So I don't think that there's a big difference in the founders themselves, and by that I
Right.
mean you have to be uh, uh, um, a little bit out of your mind if you actually consider building your own company, because it's so hard. It's so hard, and
It,
it takes so long, and you have to be very much open to grinding and to suffering, and the ups are really good, but the downs are so low, and it's really tough. So to be able to do it and to do it long term, that's not for everybody, and I think that's international. That's not something that is very different in Europe than it is in the US. And actually, one thing that I think supports this analysis that I just made is that many of the most successful American and Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are immigrants. So it's
yeah,
not that
very
there's
true.
something unique in the American founder. All of course there are some really great American founders. Um, I think what makes there are two main differences, I would say. One is something that is uniquely um, like something that is properly from Silicon Valley that I don't think is easy or maybe even possible to replicate, which is what I was explaining before, that density of talent, that intensity, that you go for lunch and you end up talking to this person, and you get it, you walk around with a chip on your shoulder because you're consistently surrounded by many people that are so much more successful than you are. And I mean that in a constructive way. Like I don't like, it's not like you suffer because of it. It's just that you're like, hey, why don't I do better? What should I do to do better? And reach the heights that this person I just met
And there's
just shared.
evidence. There's
For
evidence
sure.
of success, and that probably gives you then the confidence that, okay, if they can do it, I can do it.
That's exactly right. And you have references, things that you can model and try
Yeah.
to replicate to get to that success. So that's something that I think we should aim to do better. But that's also that, like, this has been compounded in Silicon Valley for what, a century, or
Yeah.
maybe not a century, but 75 years. That's a lot of compounding. And there's a second difference that I think is something that Europe has to really look into, which is that Europe is very overregulated, and that disincentivizes founders from making certain decisions, from actually starting companies in some cases, from taking some risks, and that's something that we could change. For example, one of my main frustrations when I compare the two systems, the European system and the American system, and by the way, still to this day, I partake in both. Like I have clients in the US, but also clients in Europe, and I have employees in the US, and I have even more employees in Europe, in Madrid, which is where I'm from. I find that, for example, the labor regulation in Europe is completely asphyxiating, especially for an earlier stage company.
Yeah,
It's too hard. It's very, very hard because when you're starting, you have to try things and you make mistakes and you create a position and then you realize that that's not the way for the company to move forward. So you have to delete, to extinguish that position. So you have to be able to very nimbly hire and let go people. And there are so many limitations, and I'm thinking what I can and cannot share here because I have so many anecdotes of really, really
yeah, yeah.
bad experiences of things that you run into when you're handling these processes in Spain. I have to be careful because also like the legal system and data protection and
Sure.
everything, because it's not like we're a huge company either. But what I mean is that it should be easier, and if it were easier, we would create more employment, we would grow faster, and we would be able
Yeah,
to invest more heavily and more consistently in Europe. Another thing, for example, is that the regulation is not only a lot of regulation and with a lot of complexity, it's also that it changes very quickly. So it's a little unpredictable. So, for example, to share one example here, in Spain, they had this regulation that was supposed to go live in January 1st or at the beginning of this year in 2026, which was called Very Facto, which was kind of an first iteration or an early attempt to an electronic invoicing system for Spain. Not exactly, but close enough for the listeners to get what I mean. So they had been working on this for maybe 18 months with the regulation. They had very clear deadlines of when it should go live. And then a couple of weeks before it went live, after all of the ERPs and basically management software that sells to Spanish companies had already developed and gotten everything ready. So they were compliant with this new regulation. They postponed it indefinitely. So basically, we see that software companies make this investment. They actually make a business plan that relies on people having to comply with this regulation. So maybe I will get this many new clients because they actually need it and they didn't before. And then after you made this investment for 12, 18 months, and in many cases we're talking millions, then it gets completely deleted. It's very hard to operate in a market where you basically cannot trust the system.
yeah. No, I get it, man. And like we, Corno is a European company, right? So we hire, people across Europe, and I think there's the tax system as well, right? Like it should incentivize people from big enterprises to lean into startups as well. Like there's talent scouting, and maybe there's tax incentives that the government can introduce, that if you're working for a startup, that it's high risk, right? So if we can maybe shorten the garden leave or whatever, that person also has the protection that they're maybe paying, I don't know, less taxes, right? Like I know in the UK, if you're in construction, you only pay 20% in as an employee, right, in the construction sector. So maybe there's something there, and there's maybe more reform. But yeah, I can definitely empathize with it there. But yeah, so I guess, right, what we're really gearing up for in this conversation, right, is okay. We kind of went through the journey of you guys founding, you building the early prototypes, you moving to San Francisco, YC, and stuff like that. How has the market changed in your view in the last 6 months? Right, it just feels like since Christmas, where people had the chance to like disconnect and just play around with all these tools, and they had extra tokens to play with, that things have just kind of accelerated since January, right? So
For sure.
what are you kind of seeing in the epicenter of AI at the moment, right? Like what are the hot trends, and how has your business changed as a result as well?
Yeah, one thing that I really like about being here is that you kind of get a front row seat to
Yeah,
how these things are going to play out. So you become aware and basically participate in these new waves of technology and these new trends before they hit any other place. So, for example, Cloud Code, which has, of course, made a lot of noise, and now everybody is using it. It was already, you know, creating waves here in Silicon Valley months before. Um, so I think, that, for example, Cloud Code is a good reference of what is now possible that was not so long ago, and I think that many software businesses that were basically predicated on, it's just not super easy to build a web app or a mobile application or whatever to do this very specific thing, and it's just a few forms and a simple workflow. That's not going to be defensible long term because the cost of building software has dropped so much. So it's a whole new world. I do think that if you are in areas where there's a lot of value in getting into the details. Like, for example, we are in the document parsing and data extraction space. And basically, we make our money because we get so much better results than if you were to just, try to read your documents using OpenAI or Claude's API. And that's that. And the way we do that is that we have several years of experience. So we know, we basically, there are certain things like how you measure success and you get the system to learn and get better over time, how you create pipelines that will scale and process not only a few hundred documents, but millions and millions of documents without a hiccup, or, combining many different tools depending on each specific case. So there's complexity to that. And I think, and our experience has been that that is long-term defensible, and actually this whole kind of new order that we are experiencing, that is being really good to us because we are now seeing more and more companies creating software company, more and more people creating software companies, and we serve those companies. Those companies in many cases become clients, and also software companies that were kind of postponing looking into a feature or a new product branch that touched on this document processing. Maybe they will build something in house. They often realize that there are some limitations, some things that are not working as well as they hoped. And hey, we start a conversation with them. So that's an excellent place for us to start building those relations. So I think depending on the nature and the how one thinks and builds their business, this is a time of great opportunity. But of course, not everything is going to work. Like, there are going to be winners and losers, and like with everything. Um, and for example, another item that comes to mind about how living in Silicon Valley kind of gives you an early ticket to see what's going to happen. A good example of that is OpenClaw, and
Mm,
the Claude bot that then became OpenClaw, and now with Hermes, which is this other approach to this
yeah.
kind of personal agent that you can prepare and work and have kind of like a personal assistant for you. Um, I saw it here much earlier than, for example, with many of my good friends in Spain that are engineers and that are interested in these things. It's just, this travels more slowly than you would think. So yeah, it's a good place to kind of, pay attention and put your ear to the ground to try to anticipate how things are going to play out, and then make your decisions on where your business and your product should go accordingly.
So that's really interesting, Alberto, right? So you are at the coal face of like AI innovation, and your team, most of your team is in Madrid, right? And so how did you like propagate what you were learning in real time in San Francisco, and like make sure that your team were abreast of that and they were able to like, get over the initial hurdles or the skepticism that, you know, exists because they're not in San Francisco?
For sure. Well, to be honest, I think at Invofox we still have plenty of room to grow in this regard and to get better, but we do make the most of it, or we try at least. And Of course, it started probably like in most startups and tech companies with the engineers and the coding, but 6 months ago, give or take, with this latest iteration of Cloud Code, like we saw clearly that a lot more things were possible, and really very easy to do that were either not possible or much harder only a few months ago. So we started applying it to, like, from our content strategy, our SEO, our marketing strategy. We also use it as kind of a monitor that every night reviews our CRM, and we run the organization on Haspot. So basically, we have a few processes that run at night, and basically tell us things that we might have missed and things that, and I was actually myself a little skeptic about how much of a return we might get on that time that we were investing in those types of things. But you actually catch up on a lot of things, like little details, things that fall through the cracks. And now we're expanding even beyond that. And now I think everybody, or almost everybody at Invofox, has a Cloud Code account. You can have non-technical people actually, vibe code, or I guess, manifest in a sense some simple applications, some approximations to problems that they understand really, really well, because they are part of their day to day. So we're trying to do that. And the way that we s- s- so, like I explained earlier, two of the founders of Invofox, we're here in San Francisco, and we try to lead by example. So we build things, we share it with the team. We also send like news and good practices and things that we read that other companies that we admire are doing, and we try to replicate and do the best of that. So that's how we are approximating it at the moment.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Um, shifting gears a small bit, right? Like, we kind of talked off air that you can go to X and you'll see anybody posting, I built insert company here in a 2 hour vibe coding session, right? And
Sure.
you and I know that, okay, it takes more than just like a single shot prompt to actually build and scale a product. But like, and I'm guessing like a lot of investors will ask that question, or a lot of customers will ask that question. How do you typically answer that? And how do you see, like, where do you see the moat for your company, or where do you see the moat in general when building um, software in the future?
For sure. So I have several thoughts here. The first one is that I think people that haven't built production software in the past don't realize that the real cost of technology is not developing it; it's maintaining it, and keeping it updated, and keeping it working, and fixing the bugs, and fixing the cybersecurity issues that consistently turn up, and just being on top of that. That's where most of the effort over the lifetime of any software will go to. Um, and For that, you really need to have technical expertise and a clear vision of what it is that you're doing and how it works. Um, of- it is absolutely powered and made easier and better by AI today. We use it, but that idea that you can just build anything and just go through the whole life cycle of any software solution just with cloud code, just don't make any errors, that doesn't really work. Um, and Beyond that, I do think that some businesses are going to get very much disrupted. I mean, the very simple applications, something that really has not a lot of insight about a business, or any deep technical complexity or
Go on,
architectural.
name a few. Go on, name a few. We want to hear it. Go on. Oh, we don't have to name the exact business, but like, let's say the categories or the types of things.
Sure. I don't know, the an application to track how many calories you've consumed throughout the day, or this kind of very basic health monitoring application, something like that. I think we are at a point where one can just vibe code one for themselves,
Mhm.
and it's going to be better because it will actually fit better your expectations, your way of thinking and of doing things. So that might be a silly example, right? But what I mean is that some things are actually not that differentiated anymore. But then you have many other cases. In our situation, for example, with Invofox, I explained it earlier, but we do document parsing and data extraction, and we do it for companies that do it at scale. So a typical Invofox customer starts processing with us at least 1 million documents per year. Many of them are much larger, but that's kind of the low point that we typically consider, engaging with, that a customer has to have for us to engage with them. And when you do that at that scale, you run into so many unforeseen problems. From how do you have an architecture that scales to that point and to the peaks of demand, and is meets your SLAs and high availability. You need probably to have at least 4 nines. So there's a lot of complexity there. How do you control for accuracy at scale? How do you get the system to learn from user feedback and do consistently better, but also knowing that you're not breaking anything that was working before? So there are all of these nitty-gritty details, and that's of course very specific to our industry. But for example, one thing that I've observed and been very surprised by recently is that Haspat's CEO is now posting on X about how he's back in the trenches, he's building, and he's actively speaking about whether you should or should not vibe code your own CRM. That seems insane to me. Like, the only case in which you should build your own CRM is if you are a CRM company, and it's insane to me that a company that does whatever else will consider doing it. Because first of all, and I speak from personal experience, when you're building a company on day one, unless you've done this many more times and you've seen it all, you don't really know what you're going to need. And there's a lot of hidden complexity and logic in these tools. Like a CRM is not just a table of contacts. If that's what you're going to use, then just use a spreadsheet. You don't need to vibe code a spreadsheet. It's integrations across systems, it's alerts, it's a dialing system so you can make your calls, it's a sequencing system so you can send emails, it's a host of permission and access controls that you need to have for your organization, because different people do different things and not everybody should see everything. And it's all of these very complex, and none of those features is complex enough that you can say, this is, I shouldn't get into this. But the complexity that arises from the aggregation of these myriad or different small problems, it's hard enough that it makes no sense. Because again, you'll build that, and next week you'll need another feature, or something will break and you'll need to maintain it. Again, the cost of software is not building it, it's maintaining it. So yeah, the whole idea, I think that's a clear example of taking things too far. And I think for the most part, one quote that comes to mind is from this Jeff Bezos talk that he gave 15 or 20 years ago, where he says that business should focus on what makes their beer taste better, which basically says, hey, your business is about a specific thing. In my case, Invofox, we focus on getting the highest possible quality on the data extraction for the documents of our clients, and everything else beyond that, it doesn't bring additional growth, it doesn't improve the business margins, it doesn't make anything substantial better. My company wouldn't be better or growing faster if I didn't pay whatever $15,000 or $20,000 for HubSpot. That is actually cheap just to not have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that, right? So the underlying complexity that the CRM handles is definitely worth the value. But and like Mark Benioff, right? Like he's disrupted Salesforce in a way that he's kind of making it headless, where he believes that the future consumer of information from HubSpot won't be the human, but will be the agent, right? Because he talks about like user experience, and like every person has a different user experience, and sometimes the complexity of these tools means that you have like these fiefdoms of specialization, right? So for example, in Salesforce, in my last company, we had dedicated Salesforce engineers, right? That
For
that
sure.
cost a lot of money, right? But
Yep.
now, if Salesforce can make things headless, your consumer then is going to be the agent who handles the complexity of trying to like figure out the multi-touch attribution and give that salesperson then the just-in-time information, right? So
Yep,
I do definitely see value in like building context for your Claude,
for
for
sure.
example, for that. But yeah, building the underlying infrastructure and how all this like fits together is definitely like a question.
Abso- uh, Absolutely, and I think I explained earlier that one of the things that we do dedicate some time to at Invofox is, for example, to run diagnostics
Yeah,
on the data that is on the CRM. So it's not like we don't do anything. Like,
yeah,
for sure, run your agents, run your own intelligence, and make it better. But don't like building it from scratch. I don't think that's, at least in our case, I'm absolutely sure that's not the best way to invest our time.
yeah. Oh man, I had an engineer come to me before. He said that he could build a replacement for Postgres.
Postgres.
Yeah, yeah, for Postgres, right? I was like, really? Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the right question there is why?
Well,
Because it's the kind of product that it
yeah,
just works really well and it's so inexpensive. So what are you trying to accomplish?
yeah, exactly. And like, there's another quote where, um, it's just because you can do things 10% better doesn't mean you can do it. You should do it, right? Like, I think a lot of people they underestimate actually, as you said beautifully, right? Like the real cost of software and the real value in software is the maintenance, right? And I think everyone now at the moment can see, oh, I can create it, right? But then working scale, maintaining it is actually where always, like, it's like the
For
iceberg
sure.
effect, right? Like the 90% of the value is um, how you harden it and have those 4 or 5 nines consistently, right? So
Definitely. And it's something that I think, at least in some spaces and some verticals, is going to become more and more important and more valuable. Because one of the things that we're seeing with these explosions of new companies and new applications and software and people doing more and more things, which is really cool. You also see that a lot of this new software is actually really buggy. People
mm,
push things, and
mm,
the following day they push an update and they break something. And I think if you are just providing a good experience or making a certain thing better for a certain user, you can probably pull that off. Like the trading might be worthwhile in some cases. But for example, in our case, we are an infrastructure company at the end of the day.
yeah,
So I can just vibe code something and break it because, hey, this new feature is really cool. Because what happens if I do that? It's just that I basically lose all of my clients because they need to rely on the solution, right?
mm,
So I think there's a place for different approaches and different focus. It's an exciting time to be building businesses like ours, I think.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to round out this conversation, right? Like, so I asked this to everybody, right? And I'm excited to get your answer because you are in San Francisco, you're at the cold face, right? But um, we kind of exist in this echo chamber, right? And like, it's whoever shouts the loudest on X seems to grab the attention. But like, what is the signal that you think everybody's missing at the moment, right? That hasn't kind of made its way to the mainstream, or maybe it's something that you're seeing at Infovox, or maybe in your customers, or when you're talking to other founders. Like, what do you think the signal that like people are missing that either scares you or excites you? You can pick whichever one.
um I'm thinking about it, that and that is not a non-trivial question, so I don't want to just say the first thing that comes to mind. But from I think there's a big difference between the way that I see people, mainly in Silicon Valley, but also more broadly speaking in the tech industry, perceive, think, and interact with AI, and then everybody else's. Like for example, I have a group of very close friends from high school, and like everybody's on a different path in life, right? One is a consultant, another one is a doctor, another one is works at a biolab, and many different things. And I can see that they are curious and they've tried their hand, but they think AI is a chat. They think ChatGPT is AI. And that is not it. That is the first application that is really useful. I use it for sure. But I don't think people realize, like here in Silicon Valley, you every day in and out, you continue to hear people talking about AGI and what happens when we generalize, and the system, the AI will get better automatically. And I think for a very large percentage of the population, if they actually became aware and dedicated time to see what's possible today, that is already as close to AGI as it's kind of undistinguishable. Like someone that works in a biology department, if they want to really do things way beyond anything that was possible 1 or 2 years ago, that's possible today. And like a one person can do insane things. And I think most people are not aware, like outside of this bubble of Silicon Valley mainly, and more broadly speaking, tech. I think outside of that bubble, people are not fully aware of it. I think that's also there's a lot of opportunity because of it. Because hey, now it falls on us to make people aware of it and try to push diffusion of this technology and help people take advantage of it. But yeah, I guess I don't know if that answers your question,
That
but that's
does.
what came to mind.
It's interesting, right? So and in one side it like says, okay, there's a lot of opportunity, but on the other side of that coin, you can say that there's a bit of humility that we need to like eat as well. Is that like right now in tech, us as entrepreneurs, we think that AI is the center of the universe, and it
For sure.
certainly is our center of the universe. But like someone driving a lorry, or someone like working as an assistant or a waiter, they couldn't care less, right? And it's like their center of gravity is so much different, right? So maybe it's
Definitely.
there's
And,
a
and,
counterweight.
and those examples for sure, but I think it's even more shocking or yeah, surprising, I guess, when you see that a lot of knowledge workers, whatever that means, but you know what I mean, people that
Yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah,
do physical work, um, beyond tech, which is most of knowledge work, by the way,
yeah,
they don't use these tools to the extent that they can be used today. They just think AI is a chat. That's it.
yeah,
And that's like you said, that's also humbling. Like, first of all, the world is a really big place, and there's so much that each of us really doesn't know or really understands deeply. But also, this huge opportunity, like, a lot of value and great companies are going to be created in the near future.
yeah. I think once we see the Tibetan monks using AI, then we'll know that it's fully diffused.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Alberto, I've really, really enjoyed the chat. It's always good to connect with founders at the epicenter of AI and kind of hearing how you're thinking about it, and also really excited to see where Infovox goes, because I think you guys are at a very interesting intersection in what you're doing. So thanks for joining the pod. Speak to you soon, man.
Thank you. Talk soon.